Hey everybody, welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness Wednesday. If you are in fact listening to this Wednesday, because I launch one every Wednesday and have, for 103 episodes in a row now. Today we're going to talk about the ancient feminine in you, what that actually means. In the collective unconscious, so if you've ever studied like C.G. Jung or archetypes or mythology or understanding like the deep, even quantum physical mechanics of the universe and life, getting kind of deep there, traditionally the feminine has been suppressed. That's just a given. We all know that. The feminine voice, feminine wisdom, all of these things have been suppressed largely in our culture for thousands and thousands of years. And this new feminine rising is about coming back to the ancient feminine. You know, the priestess, witch, medicine women type archetype. These ancestresses of ours knew things, and we are the benefactors. Their DNA lives in us. And through activating the body wisdom, reclaiming it first, we activate this beautiful, brilliant part of ourselves that is intelligent, has a healing flow and force to it. It's just beautiful. So we're going to talk about that today with Charisse Sisou. And she's the best-selling author of the book that I absolutely love and tell you, go get it. Shameless, Unleash Your Message, Impact, and Power. It's interesting. She also has over 10 years experience as a nationally award-winning belly dancer, which is how she originally came into contact with her rising feminine, this beautiful lost Egyptian ancient art of belly dancing. So that was kind of her bridge to coming into her own power and understanding how this ancient feminine was moving through her. By the way, this wasn't intentional. But if you look at the last 3 episodes, we have Denise, then Thais, now Charisse. Just kind of a funny little coincidental synchronous thing. So listen to this episode and feel into how is the ancient feminine moving through you, and how and in what ways will she seek to express? Charisse.
Cherie.
I know our name's the same. Just to stick, I told you this before, but like people have called me Charisse for so many, like my whole life. Like there's no S in the middle.
That is wild. Because that's amazing. It's a unique, it's an unusual name.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful. I love the 2 S's in there. So it's funny, you and I were presenting at a virtual, beautiful, high vibe virtual event for women last month. Mm-hmm. And so we haven't actually met in person, but literally everything coming out of your mouth at that presentation, I'm like, okay, yeah. And then you reached out to me. I don't know. We connected.
Because same. I listened to your talk and I was like, I need to connect with this woman. We are on the same team.
Yes.
We're we're batting for the same team. So
we totally are batting from the same team. And when we did talk on the phone, you said a phrase that literally was like the heart of my entire existence. You said, I am here in service to the divine feminine, as in your life.
Yeah.
And when you said that, I'm like, bing, 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 bing. Mm-hmm. That's me. Mm-hmm. I would have, I have said that to people before actually. And so to hear your voice, that was really beautiful.
Thank you.
And I love your book.
Thank you.
So let's kind of dive into what brought you into the space of having the knowing that you are here on this earth in service to Mother, to Sophia, the divine feminine, whatever we want to call her.
Sure. Sacred feminine, goddess, Mother, Father, God, like we can really, there's feminine so many.
Face of God. Yeah. She's got many
exactly names. Right. Shekhinah in like the Kabbalah.
Yes.
She has so many names, and it was not something I came to early in life. It happened much later. I started to get glimpses of it when I became a professional belly dancer. So,
yay!
So, yeah. Well, it was right. Well, we could totally take a deep dive just into that dance form, because I do feel, especially the style that I ended up doing. Like at first, of course, I was just, walking into my first belly dance class. So anything that was called belly dance, my body was immediately like, yes, I've been meant to move this way my whole life. I'd studied ballet for years and years, different folk dances and tap and modern, all kinds of training, but never belly dance, although it had always kind of entranced me. And I was like, oh, I was like attracted and frightened at the same time. Right. So finally took my first class after I'd had my babies. So I was like 30 or early 30s, and had that amazing like fish to water experience. Fast forward, right? So I was a natural. I started dancing. Like it just became, I was obsessed, right? I trained, I studied, I practiced. And before long I was teaching and performing, and something really interesting started happening in the teaching. So I was working with, by then I'd really found my home in Egyptian style dance. And the thing about that movement in particular is that it is so old. And this is like, these are movements that like are passed down, right? From like grandmother to mother to daughter.
Fascinating.
And
from the Egyptian tradition.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. And, you know, and there's lots of like if it does, it goes way back. And so I wasn't so aware of that then, but we can talk about like what I've become more aware of more recently. But let's start with, you know, my journey of like how I came into this, because it was definitely like baby step by baby step. Yeah. So I'm teaching and having a great time. And what I was noticing was the impact that these movements, and really just women learning to embrace their bodies, including and especially like the curves and the jiggly bits. You know, it was like, here's a dance where literally like a typical belly dance move, probably the one we're most known for, is the shimmy, right? Where we're just like, it's like this vibration that you do in the hips, or you can move it up into the shoulders. And basically we're jiggling our fat. That is what we're doing in a very sensual and beautiful way. And like,
well, and I want to just speak to that for a minute, because I have talked to a couple of other dancers who feel so connected to the earth and to their creativity and, you know, that womb wisdom, because it's all about second chakra, right? It's all about connection to earth and creativity in the womb. When you are doing the belly dancing, I don't know that much about it. I know it's been overly sexualized, but people that don't get it.
Yeah, right.
But it's actually quite in the sensual version. Like it's actually really divine feminine. It's so
healing.
That movement.
Yeah. So the thing about that movement is it actually connects with all chakras. However, for us in our culture, where we're really needing to heal is this piece around the second chakra. And it's not just our culture, it's like worldwide, right? Like this is, you know, enter patriarchy. Like this is what we've come to understand about our bodies. Through patriarchy, we've gotten this version of the female body that is watered down, isn't even the word. It's really maligned. Yeah. Like we've been taught to treat our bodies like ongoing projects rather than the vessels, the vehicles with which we create in the world. Right. And this is one of the differences of how patriarchy treats the male body versus the female body. But to your point around the chakras, is because of that, and because so much of our power and wisdom that's been like, how shall I say, squelched, tried. So like the patriarchy tried really hard to drive out of existence, is this ability to create, our connection with nature, our connection with our sensual and even sexual selves. And there is so much that's been layered in shame that is actually like a source of some of our greatest power. So there are moves within belly dance, especially the ones that that are around like the hips and the hip girdle and the pelvis and all this yummy stuff where just by moving these parts of the body, we start to realign and reawaken our power, and that, which is hence, the name of my book, Unleash Your Message, Impact, and Power, because that's really what it is when we start to connect with the body. And belly dance is one particular technology, right? But there are many. I just think it's a very useful one for the modern day goddess because we've become so detached from our bodies. We've learned how to operate in a world that glorifies the masculine and demonizes the feminine. And so,
and I wanted to say this here too, that like in most traditional like worship services, we are told to kind of like sit still and be, that's how we find God is. And I totally resonate with that. But just to like the body positions of like, sitting up straight and keeping your hands in and your legs crossed or whatever that women are told to do in the form of being, decorum, right? Spiritual decorum. Who knows when that started? And I can understand why. I'm just saying like, I was actually probably, I want to say 15 years ago, some beautiful friends of mine who all of us at that time were very religious and very active in our faith tradition. We decided, we saw this and we decided to do our own like sacred dance group. We weren't doing belly dancing, but we were doing our own form of movement with music. And it was just glorious. It was a way for us to worship in our own space. We weren't trying to do anything shady in terms of like going against the approved whatever. But I've thought about that often. I'm like, why did we feel like we had to keep that under the radar and be secret about it? As if it was somehow spiritual rebellion.
And
actually,
I can tell you why.
I can tell you that in that movement that you speak of, the sacred dance, it was very connecting both to earth and heaven because we were moving our physical bodies, not just worshiping with our spirits.
Exactly. Because this is the thing. And we were talking about this a little bit before we hit record, is that this seeming separation between body, mind, spirit it's totally and completely artificial. And so what you were describing in terms of traditions, so this is what we've learned. This is what we've been taught, right? Is that this is how we connect with God, spirit source, is, that like that stillness and the meditation and praying and like, yes. And so the tradition that I come from, because, fast forward and through belly dance, I kind of came into my own as a teacher and leader and was like moving with women and seeing the transformations that were happening in their lives. And like belly dance is not the only technology. I love that you brought up that it's not, there are trance dances that have been a way of connecting with spirit. Or if you look at like Sufi spinning, right? It's like another way to kind of like shift into basically an altered state of consciousness where you connect with the divine, right?
And different like tantric practices and things that I haven't really dove into, but I've heard,
Yeah. Once upon a time, we understood that movement and dance was a way of connecting with the divine. And that in fact, someone like me, this is going to get a little woo, but like who I am truly is a dancer priestess, right? This doesn't exist anymore. Like it exists in, it does, let me rephrase. It exists in some indigenous peoples, right? The wisdom keepers, right? The people who have kind of kept alive some of the ancient knowings, right? But for most of us, that our experience has been more like what you're describing. No, you sit very, very still in church. And in fact, the more still you can be, the better.
The more God will fight you, how still you are. And we tell this to our children too. Be still, be reverent, fold your arms by your,
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. Right. Like oh my goodness, that message to our children about like, being seen but not heard, like being very still, putting this kind of kibosh on their creative expression. But yeah, like this is another way of connecting with the divine. Not just that, but I know that when I'm moving, it's like the veil between worlds thins. And I am not just like so connected with the earth and so connected with my body, but I can actually feel like the reaches of my soul, and that I can feel that I'm being like physically focused, right? Mm-hmm. Like if the soul were a body, then our body here in this dimension is like the fingertips, right? It's like we are. It's just this massive, massive being and presence and energy, and we're just like, hey, what would happen if we just like met up in this 3D world and like hung out and played and in this world of contrast, and let's create some stuff.
Let's go. And creation has to happen with movement.
Yeah. Right. So true.
I just wrote for 3 solid days by myself. And in the past, I would have just sat at my computer and waited for the writer's flow. And I realized it can only happen with movement. So I have to get up and move.
Yes. I talk about this in the book. I don't know if you got to that part, but it's like,
yes,
it's like the same things that get a labor restarted, right? What do you tell a laboring mom who's, where labor has stalled? Get up and walk around, or other things in the bedroom with to just kind of like move and activate and connect with the body, and like, lo and behold, labor will restart. And it's the same thing. It's like, it's more than a metaphor. It's like, it's kind of like how everything works. So yeah, it's so true. Like one of my, coaches puts it that way of like, pray and move your feet. Right. Like absolutely that kind of like, the meditation, the connection, like that is so important, as well as taking some action, like moving the parts. Right. But, yeah.
That's beautiful. So you had a knowing that you were a dancer. You confronted, I guess, your own spiritual path or your own ways of knowing and being. How did that evolve for you? That jump from this knowing that you have this beautiful sort of wisdom keeper tradition that you've descended into this physical body, but yet this whole, I think, helping people understand the priestess history, or just as we understand it, right? Because it's so deep. I'm diving deep into goddess priestess history right now. And one thing I love to share with people that was just a huge, massive aha for me, especially as I've been writing, is that the way of the feminine, the sacred feminine, the priestess, while all these, the wisdom of the earth, Gaia, mother, it's the records are not necessarily tangible. The records are kept in the body. So they've been passed down, and the authority is by birthright. So if you're drawn to these deep, ancient feminine arts, such as dance, alchemy, all these things, there is a solid chance, and especially if you're on the earth right now, because we are entering a whole new era, and we need these people, these feminine wisdom, this feminine wisdom to emerge. And it will be those who have the remembrance of holding it in their DNA, but men and women, by the way.
Totally.
So how did you
come into that knowing.
How did that come to
Well,
be
it was,
for you?
it was such a long journey because I'm just thinking it's like, I really did not. And I used to love to say this to my students who would like to see me as this glamorous belly dancer. And I was like, look, I did not pop out of the womb in a tiara and rhinestones. Like that did not happen. I was like, I had a kind of a tough childhood. And so I was dealing with a lot of depression and anxiety, and did not at the time realize it's so funny because like the same person who could be considered my abuser also like signed me up for dance lessons. Right. And so there I was like kind of sweating through my trauma, not really understanding how much that was helping me to stay sane and balanced until when I was in high school and I was like, I need to focus on my studies now. And, even though I'd been in training and dance for like, by that point, like 12, 13 years, halfway through high school, I was like, oh, I need to put these things away. I need to just focus on my studies. And I kind of plucked out this dance piece and put it on a shelf and just became almost sedentary. And in hindsight, I needed to do that so that I could like kind of deal with the deeper issues that were underneath. And so like many hours of therapy, many hours of self-discovery and improvement later, it was like, okay. So before I could even be in a place where I could start to remember who I truly was, there was a lot of forgiveness work to do. There was a lot of this is what I will say is like, for me, the divine feminine is very much this energy of unconditional love. Mm-hmm. And because what we've learned in the world of the masculine goddess, it's like this more of a kind of this is like the fire and brimstone, right? Like it's like more of it's just different energy.
Yeah. It isn't necessarily just punishment based, but it's about your outward doing.
Yeah, exactly.
To define you.
Right. And within the world of, or just like this kind of like energy spectrum of the feminine, it is so much more about flow and internal, intuition and, instinct and all of these things that are not necessarily visible to the outside world. So anyway, I had mentioned that about the unconditional love, because if you kind of feel that you are one of these, love warriors that's been planted on the planet, many of us are, to just love, most likely you've been called by the sacred feminine because it's like part and parcel.
Feeling that. And usually you'll have a series of everyone has this, but I mean, you'll have like a series of divinely orchestrated, like really difficult life experiences to teach you that it's all coming back to that unconditional love that you're talking about for self.
Right.
Self. Because if you don't have it for yourself, you're not going to step into your purpose and start loving everyone.
Totally. So I came into this life with, so I believe in soul contracts, right? I believe that we kind of like powwow before we drop in and we're like, all right, this is what I want to do this lifetime. Mm-hmm. And part of this like path to unconditional love was I had these contracts with people who would hurt me, who would leave me, out of love. Like, like in the soul plane, it's all love. But here, it was like, all right. And I actually, I get so emotional when I think about how much love one soul has to have for another to say, I will be willing to come in. I'll be willing to come in and you'll hate me so that you can have this experience, so that you can evolve on your soul path. And but what was so profound was like, I needed to go through and learn how to like forgive and love unconditionally people that had hurt me. Right. And then through that, I was like, oh, right, I need to do that for myself. Like, it was like,
exactly. Right. That's the real point of awakening. I feel like that right there.
Yeah. it's like when you start to, and now more than ever, these practices of self-love, self-compassion, self-care, this is where the magic is at. This is how you can tell that the pendulum is really swinging, not from masculine to feminine, just to more balance, is because the sheer magic of when we take that time to anoint, when we take that time to take care of ourselves, magical things seem to happen almost effortlessly. But because this is another way that we create and make manifest. And we're just not, it's not something that we've talked about all that much, but I want to talk about this journey to being a priestess. And I think for me, it evolved from personal work and self-development to, I started getting exposed to more like spiritual concepts, right? Ideas around, say, like law of attraction or universal principles or, like unified field, et cetera, et cetera. So my eyes were really opened. And so through that journey, sometimes we get, and we were just talking about this, like sometimes you'll get little pieces of your story or little messages from just different messengers. Like maybe you'll get a massage with someone who just happens to be like super intuitive, and they'll get a message and share it with you. And you're like, oh, that's a part of who I am. And I had done a reading with a woman who is amazing. She's like, she channels Mother Mary. She's like, deeply intuitive. And she does this thing where she like reads your chakras, your energy centers. Yeah. And she, to your point, was like, so she's like looking at my energy centers and kind of reading for my soul's path. Right. This is what really kind of made it concrete. Like I knew that I was here around something, right? Like around the feminine, because through the belly dance movement, right? Like what I'd started teaching people, and out of that work, I created this course on stage presence, right? Like how to work the stage as an Egyptian style belly dancer. And what I realized is like, it went from like a workshop to a 3-day event. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, oh my goodness, this is really about feminine presence. And it's for every woman that I know, and not just women. Actually, it's like learning how to just be our magnetic, irresistible selves, and what that even looks like, and how do we get there, right? And so, like fast forward, and I'm having this reading done, and she started laughing. She's like, Charisse, I've never seen this before. She's like, most people, they'll have a life purpose of joy or freedom, or they want to experience forgiveness or whatever. And like, mine was like divine feminine. She's like, your whole soul's purpose is to be in service to the divine feminine. I was like, well, okay, no shocker there. And as she was kind of like, looking at my energetic body, this is when she talked about the dance of Priestess, which was a new concept to me, something that I'd known intuitively. Do you know what I mean? But she was the first person to spell it out. And she was like, I don't even have a name for this. And it's interesting because if you read so much, to your point, there's so little that's documented, right? Externally.
Yes.
And part of that is because like legit, like records were destroyed. Like this was a,
yes.
The more I learned about it, I was like,
they tried to wipe out I think even from the time of, I want to say Josiah in the Bible or something, they wiped out all the goddess temples. That first temple in Jerusalem had Asherah, the mother. They took all that out. Yeah. Not just Christianity, but pretty much every tradition did that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sadly.
It was devastating. It was violent. It was really, it was intense. and I love what you're talking about, of how like that encoding really needed to then be passed down through the body. And
I think they say like, I don't know where I heard this, but I think you'll love it. It's like men hold the key, but women swallowed it.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, you have the authority in your being, your divine wisdom.
Yeah. Right. Oh my gosh. I love that. Yeah, I love that. So, yeah, so this was, because so little is documented. And then you have kind of like these historians or scholars who are deeply ensconced in like a patriarchal mindset. So they'll call it like temple dancers or like fertility dances, or because like that's the only thing that like women could be about, right? Is like bearing children. So everything is translated in this very like, oh, these cults of blah, 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 blah. But what's so funny is like when you just start to scratch the surface, and I know you have researched this deeply, is like we're talking about tens of thousands of years of worship of Divine Mother in a system that was so sustainable that we did not, it's so funny, like we kind of swung the other way, right? We're like, let's try patriarchy for a while. Like 6,000 years later, we're like on the brink of self-destruction. It feels like, it's like, yeah, maybe this experiment was a little.
And what's fascinating is that as soon as they call it critical mass wakes up to that, which is going to happen soon.
It's happening already.
It is, but it's not critical mass yet, but it's getting there. Mm-hmm. But when it does, we will have a whole new earth.
Yeah.
Because we've been doing it this other way. Mm-hmm. And I want to just bookmark your story for a second, because in your book, you talk about, and I know you referenced that book, Witch by Lisa what's her name? Lisa Lister. Beautiful book. And don't let the title fool you, everybody. It's basically how tens of thousands of women have been burned for their gifts over the years. Millions, actually. Yeah. Some have documented that it's in the millions. From the beginning of time.
If you were a free thinking woman who spoke her mind, or was in the healing arts, was a spiritual leader, they did everything in their power to eliminate you. And in fact, as part of my journey, like what I've come to learn about from people, before I could do it myself, learn about and then remember like lifetimes and see where like over and over again. So this whole thing around that, like, why is that important? It's so important now because, as we're kind of like being called and stepping forward, you may feel anxious, like you may feel fearful and like not understand why. And here is the thing, is that we literally were like killed over and over and over again for being powerful, for being intuitive, for being who we are. Yeah. And so, whether you believe in past lives or not, right? Like I know it's not for everybody, but even if you just think about it being in our collective consciousness. Or
our direct ancestors.
Exactly. Right. So then that gets passed down in like the teachings and as well as our DNA of like just this visceral fear of being visible.
Like you literally would get killed if you spoke your truth. You would get killed.
Yeah.
And we are holding that energy.
It didn't matter.
Collective feminine in our throats. Yeah.
Yes.
That fear.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
Can I just read this part of your book? Because I know it's actually at the very end. And I thought it was just beautiful because, we're not going to heal anything by being super angry at these patriarchal systems, right? That's not the new way to the burn it down is the way that this all got started. People getting burned. Why would we want to be in the energy of burn it down? These systems, Yeah. So I'm just going to read this for the ladies.
It's a natural step in the process. I feel like we can't not feel the feels. You know what I mean? Like
it's justified.
Right.
It's justified to get really, really mad.
And then, exactly.
And that's what fuels that passion actually fuels change, the anger of injustice. But, and let's make no mistake, you and I both know that divine feminine can be catastrophically cyclonic and fierce, right? Okay, so I'm just going to read this part. Whatever your calling is, you will know it by the way that it is bigger than you, the way it scares you a little bit, the way it demands that you stretch, reach, and be your best self. What mantle of leadership has been passed to your shoulders? Sisters, we have been called, we have returned at this moment of time very much on purpose to swing the pendulum back, not from patriarchy to matriarchy, but to a renewed, balanced world that reveres and honors both feminine and masculine, yin and yang, spirit and body. A regal buck's antlers, as well as the blue robes of the Sacred Mother. Together, we are here to build a world that, in fact, rejects simplistic polarities like these to embrace diverse perspectives, a place in the circle for all people, to build a community that loves and honors its planets, its elders, its children, and all of its residents. And you talk about hierarchy is so last millennium.
It totally is.
So last millennium. This is and then I'll just finish with this part. This is the way of women's wisdom, of queen's leadership in circle. And we cannot bring our medicine to the world without bringing our whole selves in, without shame, without apology. That is just so beautiful, especially that last paragraph. Circle.
Thank you.
Circle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the circle and cycles of creation, the moon, everything is about inclusion and this hierarchical way of looking at souls that are somehow more powerful than others. And there's no hierarchy in spirit. I used to think that there was. I used to literally have life goals to be in a different plane in the next life than someone else. And it just doesn't resonate with me anymore. At one is what Jesus was teaching, atonement. It was at one meant. How can we encourage humanity to be together? But what you talked about is bringing our medicine to the world and bringing our whole selves in. And that means our shadow side and our light side.
Yes.
Right? So we're not
means all the sweaty parts and it's really, it's a vulnerable process. It means that not everyone will like us, and that is okay. And, but part of why, in my book, the reason why it's called Shameless is like this, those parts where we have shame, where we've shut up a door on a part of ourselves. Maybe it's our sexuality. Maybe, what I would see over and over again in my classes, it was so common. It was like women kind of like hunching their shoulders over a little bit, not just because we're like in front of the screen all the time. Like that's just kind of a cultural, everybody is dealing with that. But there was this, like, you could tell if like she got teased when she grew her breasts, or she got teased when she was like taller than the boys in class or whatever. And so she was like trying to shrink herself down and make herself smaller. So that becomes like a story that gets written on the body. And, we can do years of therapy, or we can simply roll the shoulders back and learn how to kind of like play in and with the body to release some of these stories so that we reclaim that energy and power, and we're able to bring it all in as we step forward. Because it's like, I think I make the analogy with like the hokey pokey, like we can't change the world if like, well, I'll just put my perfectly manicured toe in the water, but I'm going to leave like, my hairy armpit over there. Like, it's like, it's like, nope, all of you got to get in the pool, like all of you. Yeah. And, I think it's a part of kind of shattering that hierarchical approach as well, because there isn't like, there isn't someone who's like at the top of the mountain, and that's sort of like this, worship of the guru, or the like someone being at the top and being, exemplary. And then we're all trying to be at that level. It's like, we all have gifts. We all have medicine. We all have value. So how do we have a conversation? How do we, work and love and operate together as a unit to make this world a better place, to make it a more loving space for our animals and our, and heal the natural world, and, our children, and everyone, every perspective.
Sure.
And yeah.
I think the most beautiful, Maureen Murdoch, I always want to call her Maxine because that's just like a badass name and that's how she is, but her name's Maureen.
Yeah.
Maureen Murdoch. She's She's an elderly woman now, but 30 years ago, she wrote a book called The Heroine's Journey, and I interviewed her on this podcast. And I was able to learn from her in person at Pacifica University last year. And
that's so cool. Ooh,
she gave the best word for what you're talking about, that we're moving into from a structured patriarchal, and that is collaboration. Yeah. She said, if I could choose one word of what we're moving into when we release the need to put people above another and have all these authorities that tell us the way we need to be and mansplain and whatever, right?
Right.
It's and there are women who do that to men. So I don't mean to make it just about gender, but when we come together in that egalitarian, and the Egyptians knew this, and you can see it in the goddess temples, that it was an egalitarian society where there was a divine coupling of the male, female, sacred feminine, sacred masculine. And they were together. They were putting their gifts, and there is like the Knights of the Round Table, kind of like you're talking about a circle, right? Yeah. Like everyone's seeing each other. Yeah. And not, here's the instructor at the head of the table and all you guys take notes and do what that person says, right? That's a whole different energy than collaboration.
Totally. Like I see it as, we all gather around the fire, and there's like the mothers nursing their babies, and there's like the medicine people, and it's like everyone comes to the circle. And when there's a decision to be made or a change to be made, like that decision is made together, and every voice is valued, every perspective is valued and considered. And, and there isn't that exclusion. It completely changes the conversation. And then what I would add to that is that, because I think, like within the marketing world, this is something that I've been talking to my clients about a lot around being inclusive, right? How to take some of these, like, I was a women and gender studies major in college. So like, I learned a lot of this stuff early. Cool. So like, I got angry when I was 19. I was so pissed off. Got it out like early. When the scales fell from my eyes and I saw the patriarchy for the first time, I was like, I don't know if I can drop the F-bomb, but like insert F-bomb there.
That's a very fitting word for when you wake up to it. So we'll just.
Yes. I was just like, what is this? How come no one told me about this? But what I've learned is that not everyone has that experience. And for some of our sisters, that experience happens when they go through a divorce and suddenly they're in this like uber patriarchal, like legal system and like fighting for custody or what have you. And they suddenly realize like, oh my gosh, like this is, a dear friend of mine. This is when she was discovering some of these like feminist authors and stuff. And she's like, Charisse, why didn't you tell me? And I was like, I thought you knew. I just didn't know. Like, I didn't know. Cause like in my 20-year-old brain, I was like, oh my gosh, like I felt like I was late to the party. And, so it is so
those heretics, right?
Valid.
That's how they were branded. Those women that blew the whistle, they were branded.
Oh my
heretics.
Goodness.
Yeah. They still are.
Absolutely.
To some people.
They still are. They still are. I think it's one of those,
I actually think it's one of my life goals now to be a heretic. So
I'd say like, check, achieved. You're already there.
Checklist followed.
Basically, anyone who is just even speaking these things or talking about these things or just even saying like, let's consider, it shocks me. Like I was kind of looking for a, earlier when my kids were younger and I was like looking for a spiritual home for us. And I remember like finding this local church and they seemed really cool and everyone seemed really happy. And I was like, oh, hey, like, let's check this out. And then I did a little reading and research on their website and I was shocked when it literally said that no women could come to the pulpit. Like no women could lead like a sermon. The only place where they could lead was in the children's program. And I was like, wow.
That's pretty alive and well in most.
Totally. It's so, it's like,
they're either leading other women in groups of women or children. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is like, it's been an idea that's been around for thousands of years, but it's rooted in this initial, this initial like throwdown of removing the goddess and the divine feminine in all aspects. And so to even because then there was like all this wisdom that women had and could offer, and anyway, it was just I don't even need to get into that, the power dynamics of that. But
it's the word
very
tradition,
alive,
right? It's a tradition of the fathers. Yeah. So it must be true in that space.
But what's so interesting is if you just go a little bit further back in history, and it's not even that far back, like we're like less than 10,000 years ago, then you have long standing traditions where women were revered, where we did recognize the female face of God, where even women's bodies were worshipped and revered. Parts of our bodies that are now considered, quite shameful, and like put that away and perfume it.
Don't
and
nurse
like,
in public. don't nurse in public.
Yes. Oh my gosh, there are so many stories across goddess traditions of even just, the female form as being like an awakening, or being that catalyst for healing, or whatever. And so it's really very interesting as soon as you start doing any kind of research. Like once you find, I like to think of it as like, we'll find like the hem of the sacred mother's, gown or mantle, and you just like find this golden thread and you just start following it. And there's so much there, and it's like you feel the truth of it in your cells, in your bones, in your body. And where it feels like, oh, right. Like once upon a time, we didn't just.
It feels familiar.
These vessels. Yeah.
Well, when you talk about looking for a spiritual home, searching for that, there's a structure that we could search for, right? That could make us feel part of a community. And ultimately the spiritual home that we're all really searching for. I mean, outside of like bringing your family somewhere and having that more formal setting, that it's coming home to that inner, resting in your inner goddess, that inner priestess, whatever you want to, whatever type speaks to you there. But it's just, and I was reading that through your whole book. Like that's what your book's about. Yeah. It's totally. Your spiritual home was connecting to dance and, kind of thinning the veil between worlds so that you could embody that. And embody is one of my favorite feminine words because we have, like, we're talking about all the shaming, and it's like women were only seen as fertility vessels. Yeah. We were only seen as, sexual objects or whatever through what's ever come down.
Right. So then our value is tied to that. So then it matters like what shape we're in, or what age we are, and whether we're childbearing age or not. I mean, it's like, it led into all kinds of ridiculous extrapolated conclusions from that. Sure. So that you have some of the wisest people on the planet kind of like shelved, which, of course we're shifting away from that. But it's like my relationship with dance and my relationship with my body was really reconnecting with myself. And I think this is really, for me, one of the big distinctions, right, between what we've come to know as religious and spiritual practice versus what once was. And because once upon a time, that relationship with the goddess was very individual, was very, you would have your own altar and like, this is the thing too, like there may not even be like a human made house, right, to worship her. It would be a copse of trees. It would
usually
be a hill,
in nature, right?
Right? Yeah. Outside. You would feel the energy. It might be a cave that looks like, a woman's vulva or something. They'd be like, oh, that's a sacred spot.
Those yoni caves are all over. Like I went into it anyway. Yeah. I've been to them in Europe and different places. They're all over.
Incredible. It's incredible. And so even, for example, the practice of the rosary, like that, there's another wonderful book to check out, which is called The Way of the Rose. And,
I have that book.
that evolved. Huh?
I love that book.
That book is amazing. And it was cathartic for me because, there was a point where it was like I read it and I just flashed back to like being in the caves. I was like, oh my goodness, like I've been in this place. Like I had like a real soul connection with the church that they were talking about in the south of France. But
well, that book is about how the feminine has been hidden in the rosary, like the Catholic rosary.
Totally.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Totally. Like they were actual roses that we would offer to Divine Mother. And then it became, it is really fascinating when you start to see practices that have really not gone anywhere, like even the way that like Mother Mary is revered in so many parts of the world. It's fascinating. Like there's a lot of stuff that's just hidden in plain sight. But it's really, really very cool. But I think this was where the rift happened with like a church that wanted to, or churches, I should say, because this is like, it's not restricted to one spiritual practice or whatever, but where they like this wanting to kind of like own the power and be the source of like, come here to get your connection to God versus I can connect with Mother, Father, God in my backyard. Like I can connect by,
and that was heretical. That's been heretical for like, I study the female mystics, like Julian of Norwich and Hildegard and all these people who lived during the time where they were pretty much channeling these beautiful books and works and that desire to connect to the beloved. And they just deeply, deeply craved this at a spiritual core soul level. And their priests forbade them to even really worship on their own. Even though they lived a monastic life, they had to go through a priest to who was, authorized to, like I said, holding the key, right? We hold the key for you. And, this plays out in modern day. And so it's like part of this awakening is, yes, I respect that you're saying you have this key. This is also with the dynamic between Peter, the apostle, and Mary Magdalene, which I'm writing about. He held key, and she was trying to teach him something deeper. And that all got written out with the Nicene Creed. It's all in the Apocrypha now. But the church didn't want that in there because it was a woman. So they made her a whore. Yeah. And then renounced it in 1969.
The high priestess that she was.
She was the ultimate priestess. She was the ultimate priestess. So, wow, I feel like we dove real deep here. So
we did.
I love it. And I know some of my listeners will love it. And some people will be like, I think I'm going to put this over here on the shelf. We'll come back to it maybe, or totally like put it away. But how can we round this? I don't know if we got into the breadth of your story and your awakening. Is there anything more you want to add? Because I kept interrupting because I said, wait, let's talk about that.
I love it.
What feels like, how can we round this out with, you sort of like stepping into who you are and owning it and now writing and being this divine feminine vessel that I see you as. How did this sort of like, how did you just give yourself that permission? Maybe that's a better.
Oh, it's such a good question. Well,
like, cause at some point when you really step into your soul path, it's like self-granted, self-anointing. You somehow have to like put the healthy respect of the others who love you and what you've been born into a space of respect and honor. But at some point you say, I guess I got to give myself the permission here.
Yeah. Right. Well, part of it, it's so funny. Like two answers drop in. One is that it is an ongoing challenge to give myself permission to represent this work, right? Because the pull of our environment is strong. So like, you know, like I do conscious things to connect with the feminine so that I don't completely like lose that connection by the end of the day. But that it feels like an ongoing, like, all right, how can I want to do more. And then the other side of it is that it just feels so darn good. Like, you know, I'd love to be like, oh, you know, like the suffering of the mystic, but it's really more so that the more that I lean into the feminine, the more that I really just kind of like surrender to that path, the more joy, the more pleasure, the more ease, like things. What's so funny, this is what happens without fail. When I go in the direction of my like brainiac logic, right? Where it'll be like, this is what you should do right now. You should be doing X, Y, and Z right now. Like you want to launch this thing. Like when I start getting there, oh my gosh, it's like someone threw gum into the works. Like things will just like come to a grinding halt and, you know, things will slow down and get really hard. And I'm like, what is okay, I know what's going on. Yes. I need to go play and be in my feminine, like, which is like being embodied, right? Connecting with nature, experiencing beauty for beauty's sake, right? Being creative for the sake of being creative without it necessarily having like be toward an end, right? And then
which is so masculine.
The gears just start, right? Totally. I mean, and we need both, right?
Yes.
So, you know, we've just had such an over indoctrination in the former that, you know, we have women and men burning out. Like when we're not connected with the feminine, it really mucks things up. And so you have people who are, oh my gosh, like right now, our nervous system so raw, people just so stressed out, burning out right and left, you know, like their bodies kind of, and it's just, how do we heal that? How do we balance that is by connecting with the feminine. So there's the part that's kind of like, I'm constantly doing this dance where I'm like, I recognize you, divine masculine, and I need to do something more balanced here because I'm getting stuck. Right. And then the other piece around, like it's for me, it's what's fun. That might sound
play and the fun and and like you said, the beauty for beauty's sake. Why would we need a reason to just be in our own beauty, whatever that is, whatever that art form is, whatever it feels like to nourish and love yourself up.
And it begins with us, right? So for example, I can always tell, you know, our relationship with even like how we adorn our bodies, right? Mm-hmm. How we, you know, play with makeup or don't play with makeup, play with our hair or don't play with the hair. It's like, it's not about a particular modality because there's no shoulds here, but there is definitely something about like we feel it when you're in that, like those yoga pants that, you know, like feel so good on and make your butt look like wow. Or like if you're in that dress that just makes you feel so just like flirty and powerful and feminine and like, wow. Like, it's like when we play in that, it's like, oh, that's where that magnetism, that's where that like just try it. Like, you know, it's like when you kind of like, just like, I'm just going to throw on these like schlumpy.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I used to do this whole thing with image consulting and many years ago when I was in pageant coaching and different things. And I always tell women you need to decide how you want to feel every morning before you step in your closet.
Exactly. Right.
How do I want to feel? And the adornment that you choose, whether consciously or non, will affect how you show up that day and how you feel in your body. And how others relate to you. So some days it is a sweats and yoga bun day or whatever.
Absolutely.
Messy bun.
Absolutely.
And some days, like you said, you know?
Yeah. You know, and there's there's
great.
beauty in all. It's like, it has so much to do with intention, right? So if I'm like throwing on the sweats because I don't want to think about it and like, bleh, you know, and like maybe they're a little torn or whatever, and I'm like, well, you know, like that has a certain energy. But if you're like, I want to put on the most comfortable clothes, like lounging. I just want to lounge and be casual, funky, cool. And so you're in your sweats and your messy bun, but you're feeling hot as heck, right? Like completely different signature. Yeah. So it's like, it's not even about the, what you're choosing to put on your body, aside from it being like what feels so good on the skin, that it's like well cared for, and just as we take care of ourselves. So it's
there are days
totally
to
in
feel
this
sparkly. There are days to feel sparkly. There are days and seasons, even not just days, where you are more introspective, a little more somber, needing to process, needing to heal. I went through months of that where I was just processing life and needing to just heal. I wasn't going to put on a beautiful silk blouse because I have those. And I have, I just have to say this, I have this beautiful, deep purple cashmere silk blouse with little rhinestone buttons. It's just gorgeous. Yeah. And I hardly ever wear it. And I remember going through my stuff the other day. I was like, why don't I wear this more?
Right?
It's like
we're saving it for a special occasion, and it's like, what is the special occasion is today. It's today. Like,
I think I still have that.
We just like show up.
And I think I still have that old programming of like women needing to somehow like don't stand out too much, or like the spiritual ickiness around like, hey, you'll be more humble and whatever if you kind of downplay the whole beauty thing. I've gone through so many seasons of processing through all of that, but oh my gosh. Okay, so let's wrap.
I know. I know, you're so sweet. I would say like all you have to do is look at nature, right? To really get that guidance, because does nature hold back? No. She's raucously, unapologetically gorgeous. Like whether it's the autumn leaves or the frost on the trees or the stone formations around Sedona that were just boggling my mind, like my eyeballs were feasting the entire time that I was there. It's like, we can take our cues from that. Like, is Mama Gaia getting like, I don't know,
and sometimes the Black Panther. Yeah, well, exactly. Who does she think she is? This Mother Earth. And sometimes it's that Black Panther walking through the jungle. And sometimes it's a tropical beach, right? Like, there are so many faces to who we are and what we choose to embody. Sometimes it's a crystal ice lake. I don't know, but okay. So giving that permission, and really owning it. Do you have any, people need to go grab your book. I'm just going to tell them how to find it. Because you've got a lot of stuff in here about giving that, your journey and giving that permission to yourself. And there's some great tips in here. How do people find your book?
Well, it is available on Amazon as well as on my website. You can get a signed copy if you order it from me, and it's shamelessmovement.com /book. And the name of the book is Shameless, Unleash Your Message, Impact, and Power. And the audio, I just finished recording the audiobook. So that
and you have such a great voice.
To be, thank you. You're so kind. You're very kind. So that will be released soon as well. And so that will be available on Audible. But please do. And there's all kinds of resources and other ways to get in touch with me. They're all in the book, but we have also the Facebook group, Shameless Movement. And I would love to connect with you and just, for sure. Like, love for you to get your hands on my book and let me know how it reads for you. Because what I find is
for anyone who listens to my podcast regularly, you will eat this book up. It's really good.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Yeah. This has been super fun. And I know you and I are going to continue to journey together in other projects and things. And I'm sure we'll have an offer for our audience when we get to the point in 2021 where we're aligned when we've really developed this, but I know for sure your tribe also will be benefiting from that. So yeah, it was just really soul nourishing to talk to you today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Same. Always a pleasure.
Remember the power of experiencing beauty for beauty's sake. That very feminine way of just tapping into what nourishes and connects you and creates flow to life, to nature, to the cycles and rhythms, the pulse of the earth, the heartbeat of the earth. This brings you back into your body temple, into your inner wisdom and knowing, and that depth. You can find Charisse Sisou on her website, shamelessmovement.com. Grab her book. It's amazing. And also remember that we are ramping up Women Seeking Wholeness Facebook group. So ask to join there. We have some cool new structure putting into 2021 for that group so we can have more discussions and really move into a space of community and connection so that we can hold form and space for each other in these really challenging times. Have a glorious week, and we'll talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.